You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, September 19th, 2024, 7:36 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And one of the things that comes up when we talk about attachment so often is how do I know whether I should bail on this relationship because of the attachment challenges that are being faced? And this is both at work and also at in your personal life. In the work environment, of course, the when there's a hierarchical power system involved, it can be quite challenging to figure out what to do about the attachment conditioning that you see in front of you, particularly if it's an environment that isn't interested in the whole person and cultivating the wellness of the whole person. I say that somewhat euphemistically because I think that the business culture that mostly is taught is not essentially geared toward the wellness of the whole being that comes and does the work for you. And often it's the people that are the least feeling that are able to climb up the hierarchy because of the challenges that the work environment can present. And then there's also the aspect of exploration that comes in. How well are you able to explore so that you can understand what the needs of the business are and what direction to carry it in terms of leadership roles, or how to figure out at your level of management what needs to happen so that the larger operation of the business can unfold in a good way. And then also, I guess it would depend on scale. At a certain point, the size of the business would make it more challenging and less personal. In a really small office, of course, you know everybody and you know even more about them than you might in a larger environment, family and so on, interests and so on. You may even socialize outside of the office. A lot of source of a lot of relationships that people have in their adult life comes from the work environment. Very dismissing people, of course, interact better with more preoccupied people. The difficulty for the preoccupied person is that they don't explore well enough to maybe manage something beyond support of somebody who can explore. And then how toxic, as we like to say, can the environment get before you would actually consider changing the environment. And then in a personal life, of course, if you're in a relationship and you've formed an attachment agreement, you have the dynamics of the relationship, and the attachment patterns play out there as well. Secure people tend to go with secure people, so that if you were operational in a business relationship, secure people would also tend to go with secure people. Dismissing people would either go with dismissing people or preoccupied people. Disorganized people don't really show up reliably enough, or they get to climb very far in work hierarchies because it's so organized around performance. And if you can't show up reliably, then you end up in these sort of cul-de-sacs of tasks that don't really require that level of reliability, or outside of it altogether. And then depending on what actually the skill set is, whether it's more personal or relational or more technical. Um, what I think we really should be doing is organizing our lives around primary exploration, the thing that actually we find meaning in. And the way that our business life is organized is usually not around that concept. And so we might think of that more in the secondary exploration camp, where you're really just gathering the time, energy, and resources that you need in order to be able to pursue the primary exploration, the thing that really you derive meaning from. And you should really be able to organize it in your mind that the secondary exploration is uh, in second position, not in first position. But it gets complicated by the nature of our culture and the tokens that it grants for achievement in the terms of what's valuable to our culture. And often the pursuit of cultural tokens, which is usually money or status or position, often doesn't line up either with primary exploration. And so we have these choices to make about what we do and what we pursue. One of the things about primary exploration that's important to understand is that it requires a high level of mentalizing to be able to determine what actually is meaningful and to figure out how to pursue it. And at that level of mentalizing, you could see in relationship to the secondary exploration that you don't get out of the secondary exploration the things that are essential to a fulfilling life. But you do get resources that you need for the primary exploration. So how do you balance that, particularly if the things that you find rewarding are not the things that are culturally valuable? So then you have to have a strength of self, right? A strength of uh, understanding that you're foregoing the cultural tokens for a more fulfilling life. I'm quite sure that with all the memes that there are out there about this sort of thing, this, the most common one I remember is that spending more time at work was not one of the things that 5 people say when they're dying that they value. I think also the issue is that we are meant to be in relationship. And one of the aspects of exploration and the pursuit of meaning is the expression of what you find meaningful to people that are interested in you and your point of view, your particular set of gifts that you have, and how they like to follow your narrative. And I, at this point in my life, have known people for like 45 years, some people longer. I have a couple of friends still from high school. And it's a long time. It's a long time to watch those cycles. I think that a cycle really is around 30 years. And when you're caught up in the first cycle of life, you don't have any perspective. It all seems so new. And then the second cycle of life begins to unfold, and you recognize in your 30s and 40s the engagement that children have in life that was in some sense similar to the engagement that you have. You see that as you get the perspective of the development of humans as they age, that we go through these same series of challenges and come up with solutions. And each generation solves their generational problems in a different way. And what's completely invisible to young people is that they are actually standing on the creation of the last generation. They're not inventing it new, or the world hasn't always been thus. Uh, and But when you get old enough to have completed 2 cycles, it's very stark how these evolutions of development happen in people, and the processes that they go through as the body grows and the mind develops through childhood and adolescence, and how that late 20s, early 30s, when you're your most brilliant, your most physically capable. It's really quite astonishing to be able to see it. Um, and also the perspective of what is important and what isn't, and what lasts and what doesn't. Would it? You're muted.
I guess you're talking about secure people, right? Not insecure.
No, not at all. I'm talking about all of us in this big great mess together.
I like that. For me, it's the opposite, where my life now is a very, very strong understanding that my life will be better with age, not
Oh,
which is opposite of a lot of people's beliefs about their lives. It's almost like I've woken up, now I can do stuff.
yes, that's all true, and it's actually not at all contradictory to what I meant. Uh, I say in my half jesting manner, I didn't have much of a childhood. I didn't have much of an adolescence. I didn't have much of a youth. I didn't have much of a young adult life. I didn't have much of adult life, but I finally pulled it together and had a really good old age.
Unlike an ordinary person's life who's just feels very dull after 30, 35. They're just
Oh, yes, but that's because you don't engage in the primary exploration. You get stuck in the rut of secondary exploration that doesn't produce any liveliness, and you hunker down. And also, what the collection of disappointment gets so great that you drag around behind you, that you just don't want to risk activating it, so that you have to be disappointed again, and so you begin to withdraw from the things. You begin to take less risks, so that you don't put yourself in a position that if it doesn't work, you're going to be crushed by the gathering disappointment. And this also has so much to do with insecure and disorganized attachment, because you can't make things work, and you can look at other people and how they make things work, and you can't understand why you, who are equally capable, can't get it to work, because you can't see through the attachment views that create the perception of reality the way that it does. And so when you undertake the attachment work and begin to really explore, but also accompanying insecure and disorganized attachment is lesser or low mentalizing capacity. And so you can't mentalize well enough to really engage in a primary exploration. Again, we're back to this idea that the capacity for primary exploration is tied to advanced mentalizing strategies that you have to develop. We can get the basic mentalizing strategies together that will form insecure, disorganized relationships and allow us to engage in some level of secondary exploration, but it doesn't really free us to go beyond that. So then you have to, and then we make these trades, right? One of the things that when we're unable to engage in primary exploration, that we do is look for situations that we can get ourselves into that will allow us to let ourselves off the hook for having to explore. So we take a job, for instance, that requires us to be there for 60 hours a week, or a job that requires you to travel, or any of the other things that then prevent you from being able to form long-term relationships that then you would need in order to really be able to support primary exploration. And it can be quite compelling that this is what we need to do. And then if we have a strong denial of death, which is simply that I can get to it later, that's how most of us deny death, that there's some time later that we'll eventually be able to do the things that will matter to us. But that's completely misoriented, really. We need to reorient so that the primary exploration is the central focus of our lives. And we add to that the secondary exploration as we need the resources in order to be able to do it. But then we still have to make the secondary exploration such that it doesn't consume all of the capacities that we would need for the primary exploration. So it's easy enough to be exhausted by the activity of the secondary exploration that then doesn't allow the primary exploration. Get to it on the weekend, the end of the year.
I realized today is that you need mentalizing before you can do primary exploration. I didn't.
Well, you have to be able to mentalize above and beyond I think the ordinary stuff where you can't really comprehend what's meaningful. You can't really comprehend how to pursue it. So part of this process of beginning to reorient and focus on exploration is to begin the process of mentalizing. But I think that if you do make that kind of reorientation where that's central, then the limits of the demands of secondary exploration will become clearer. And if you can see clearly whether you are using the limitations that are imposed on you by the secondary exploration are there because it allows you to escape from primary exploration. There's that sense that you're off the hook for having to do it because you don't have the resources to do it. So that could be the form of under-earning, so you don't have the resources to do it, which is quite common. Or allow the demands of the job to consume you. Now, obviously, in a perfect world, the primary exploration and the secondary exploration would be the same, so that all of the resources are put into the primary exploration, but then we would have to have a vastly different culture than we have. Our culture is so oriented around consuming and buying and selling that, and those things don't tend to, or at least I don't see a way that they would be so rewarding Christian.
George, I wonder about this a lot, and I mean, maybe you could build a society like that, but as a child of musicians who maybe they would have had a different way of thinking about this if they had been able to make more money in this country, but like they kind of warned me, like, don't go into music, which is actually good advice for me because I was not a very good musician. But I always wonder, like, aren't we kind of currently living in this society that kind of, there's like an ideology of like make your passion into your work and you'll never work a day in your life? And like I hear that and I'm like, that just sounds like a way to like ruin your passion. Like I wonder if you can actually really have both, or if you're kind of gonna give up things necessarily by tying what you love to do to money.
I grew up in a very upwardly mobile family, and they got into the upper middle class, and they really drilled into us the essential nature of living in the upper middle class. And my mother's refrain was sounds a little bit like yours, which was, "Oh, George, don't. Whatever I wanted to do, you'll be poor."
Right.
um, but then they were unhappy the whole time, nicely appointed, but unhappy. And my mother would rage at the dissatisfaction of that bargain. So I really am accustomed to that. But I also see the the solution to that for a lot of people is distraction, and so there's a constant, particularly if you're well resourced, just a constant series of distractions that come up. But it doesn't relieve the absence of meaning in that sense. You don't have to have fancy distractions. You can look at Netflix. Uh, you can watch a series. You can watch the first episode and can be completely engrossed in it and completely distracted from the dissatisfaction of it. But then as soon as it's over, you have to watch another one. So the distraction takes hold again. And then you have to watch another one. The distraction is over. Hopefully you're exhausted enough that you can go to sleep, but it doesn't really relieve that. And I think that because we're a meditation community and a lot of us have a serious practice, there is in that practice this pursuit of primary exploration and the openness of that. But in the work environment, how often do you encounter a work environment that's really receptive to these kinds of practices? I have conversations quite a bit with people about how one might affect the work culture so that it is more holistic around supporting the development of the whole person, not just the part of the person that is useful to the business, and that really the orientation would move from um, uh, uh, increasing the value for the shareholders to increasing the value of the people that work at the company. And even at Mettagroup, which is our tiny little thing, we're a B Corp, so that we don't have to make a profit. And the order of reward is the people who work here, the people that we serve, and the activities we do, and then any investors or benefactors that we have in terms of orienting it. So I think that you can do something.
I think you can go to corporate and tell them that meditation is part of the wellness culture, which will make you into a more productive employee, and then they'll give you some time to meditate.
Right. They might. But they'll also need to see that it is actually doing that.
So you have like a spreadsheet right next to you, and you do some tracking.
2 more widgets an hour.
Yeah, we have that in our company. I don't think so. It helps very much. A meditation once a week.
Mm.
So the company's like, look, we're providing all these things. Like, now you should do better work. Like,
Yeah.
so.
But then if you're pursuing meditation as a primary exploration, how are you going to go on 4 retreats a year? How are you going to take 2 months off a year to go on retreat, right? Or whatever it is that you need to be able to do. I know that when I decided that's what I needed, I took a dopey job because once a month you handed in your schedule, and if you didn't want to work any days, there wasn't an issue with with that. It's just you had to do the days that there were no flexibility at all once you turned in the schedule, but there was no gripe, whatever the schedule was.
So 4 weeks is good enough? I thought you're gonna be like every day there has to be some aspect of that.
The mainly what I'm aware of is that the you want to go on a 2 week retreat in order to make rapid progress, and you want to go on one every quarter. So
I
how are
did
you
it
gonna?
for a month, but it feels horrible after you come back. It's always the
What do you like to call that? Afterglow, after nothing, after shock. Depending on how you react to trying to reintegrate it to the strictures of culture, really.
George, after I got off the retreat with you, driving in LA traffic was maybe the most terrifying experience of my life. I was not ready for that.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have them in the countryside and then to leave the next day as the retreat leader. That's what I usually get a hotel room nearby and just go to the hotel room and decompress and drive home in the morning.
I do feel meaning. The word meaning is overloaded term. It can be. I feel there has to be a different.
Well, it doesn't have to be at the hallmark level of meaning, right? It could be, and in fact, the biggest bang for the buck in terms of meaning is to go all in on everything that you do, so that all of the ordinary activities that you engage in your life, you're really trying to do the very best that you can do, so that all of the activities of life take on this quality that I'm doing my very best. And then the ordinary becomes a kind of sacred practice, which is really astounding when you can get into that view that every little thing, every little gesture is an expression of my authentic best self. That I think is the ultimate place to get to. That makes sense.
And that would be a view. That's not an activity-based meaning. That's a view-based meaning.
Yeah.
Right.
You hold the view and everything takes on that meaning. So how can you train yourself to be able to hold the view and not have it interrupted by the way that things go? I like to say, make a brilliant plan for what you're going to do and then do what happens. Because where you could get really hung up is if the plan doesn't unfold the way that you wanted it to, because it's such a brilliant plan. And it really is what happens. That's what matters, not what you plan to have happen.
Maybe I'll change my view from metta to something else, something like this.
Yeah, the view, that lively awakened awareness is what Dan used to call it, that view. And then it transforms into an enlightened view if you can hold it uninterruptedly. But the ordinariness of the buffers that smack into you, right, and knock you off balance is it's just finding that happens quite a bit. But then there's this sort of, and it isn't so intense, but this subtle, just level of ease and happiness with all things is what begins to happen. And so there's that liveliness to it. That I sometimes use the word curiosity. Each moment you move into it with this sense of curiosity about what's actually happening. There's not this idea of what it should be or shouldn't be. It's an openness and a curiosity about what is happening. And then, of course, you have to hold the ethical frame for it. An understanding of what that is. Which actually, when you talk about work, what is it that the businesses that you're engaged in supporting, and could you describe it as an ethical activity or not? And then we might think that there is no consequence to us if we work in an environment that is engaged in something that isn't particularly ethical. But I again think that that's a kind of ignoring of what actually happens, rather than settling into what happens. That makes sense. And then how do you even find that out? Businesses are very circumspect about actually what the mission is often. And unless you're up into the levels of management where it's actually open, you wouldn't know. You have to make some discernment. But I would say if we were really considering when to come and go from a relationship, it's when it doesn't seem as if a workable solution is available. And this is the same in work relationships and in personal relationships. If you're in, I know from in my work with couples in personal relationships, where you get to often in relationships that are at a breaking point is that one person is content in the relationship and the other person is not. And one person feels well taken care of in the relationship and one person does not. And the person who feels well taken care of doesn't feel a need to change the agreements of the relationship because it works for them the way that it is. And that becomes the breaking point, because the person whose needs are not being met, who's not receiving the care that they need, if they continue in that, will burn out and won't be able to continue in the relationship either. And this is true also in the work environment. If your needs are insufficiently met and it puts you in a place where you could burn out from continuing to engage in the work, if you do burn out, you still won't be able to do the work. The opportunity will be lost. But you won't be in a position where you could navigate into some other situation that might be better. And there's a certain tipping point where you just don't have the resources anymore to navigate finding another place. And that's where you end up really just burning out in the situation that you're in. Sometimes your well-being and your sense of self-esteem and all the rest of it is undermined by the unfairness of the situation that you're in. And it makes it harder and harder to hold a mentalizing state where you can figure out how to get out of it. So I would be sensitive to that and leave before the collapse. Because if you do collapse, there's going to be the rebuilding time that would come before you could actually pivot into something else that would work better. And sometimes it's hard to rebuild and takes a much longer time than you might think. That pattern in life is in the workplace as well as it is in personal life. Secure people go with secure people, dismissing people go with dismissing or preoccupied people, and disorganized people don't function well enough to really have much of a reliable work life. So they tend to be under-resourced. And that under-resourced state is so stressful in itself, it's hard to pull yourself out of it. So there's a kind of downsizing, seclusion that happens. Would it?
Sorry about the workplace. You know, the idea of like the extremely nice, sweet person has really gone deep in my head now. I feel like every nice, sweet person, kind, sweet person has some form of um with average mentalizing. I just feel like they have some form of disorganization. So I'm not sure if that's a right view to hold.
So as long as you're discerning carefully between pretend mode and the sweetness of disorganization, that would make sense.
I mean, you have this belief that nobody can be naturally sweet and kind.
The reason that the sweetness is in disorganized people is because they way overvalue kindness. They grow up in cruel environments where kindness is unusual. And so they value it as something that's unusual. So that you would make an ordinary expression of kindness and they would be moved by it, visibly moved by it, because it seems to them like such an extraordinary gesture when actually for you it's pretty ordinary. If you grow up around kindness, secure people grow up around kindness that is just ordinary. It's in fact pretty expected. It's like breathing or getting a meal. It's just in the environment constantly, and you grow up in environments that aren't like that. The valuations are different. So that's I think one of the origins of the sweetness and the disorganized people. They respond in a strongly emotional way because of ordinary expressions of kindness, which makes them appear really sweet.
And to an disorganized and secure person feels, you said, a little bit of arrogance, more.
Well, secure people have always been able to mentalize better. They've always been able to collaborate and form relationships. They've always been able to pursue goals in a way that tends to work because of of the attachment conditioning that they had. And like everybody else, they don't see it or understand it as attachment conditioning. It's just the view. But then when they encounter people who can't do all of that as easily as they can, and they appear to them to be as capable, right, as gifted, as talented, but still can't do it, they don't understand why that is. They just think if I can do this and you're like me, you should be able to do it. And that you're not doing it means that either you don't want to and you're not telling the truth about it, or you're just not capable. But I can't figure out why. And actually, it's not that interesting to me. So that's the kind of arrogance I call it.
So they think that they cannot think that the other person is not capable.
Well, oftentimes the thing that prevents somebody from doing something is not their innate capacity, but the attachment views that come up that prevent them from being able to do it. So the secure person recognizes that capacity, but doesn't really have any basis for understanding the interferences that prevent the person from being able to do it. And their mentalizing collapses into you're as capable as I am. You should be able to do this. If I can do this, you should be able to do this. It's not a big deal.
Feels like lack of empathy, but I don't know.
Yes, I would say it's also that lack of compassion. They've, the disorganized people are the ones who are the most compassionate because they've endured the most cruelty. And when you can get on the other side of that, it really opens up this deep sense of compassion for other people's suffering. Of course, if you can't get to the other side of it, it can easily turn into an impulse to cause suffering. But, secure people, and remember that secure people tend to be with secure people who can all do it. So they're in a whole group of people where everybody's capable and everybody can do it. And when they encounter somebody who can't do it, it doesn't make sense to them. They don't have references for it. When they're lied to, they don't really get why they're being lied to, because they don't lie. They don't see the need for lying. So they understand that they're being lied to. They can't tell whether you're lying or not. And they don't understand why you would do it, since being truthful is easier. Does that make sense? There's an absence in some ways of experience that would, or modeling that they could employ to make sense of it. But not true for insecure and disorganized people. Their whole childhood was witnessing those kinds of things happen. Really understanding that the way the appearance and the reality are not the same. Whereas in secure, the appearance and reality are most often the same. So you don't develop there's no need to detect the difference between the appearance and the reality in the secure world. Whereas in the insecure and disorganized, there's a constant need to discern the appearance from the reality. So that's the kind of thing that happens. Maybe arrogance isn't the right word, but also they don't play. That's the other thing. They really just don't engage because they don't have to. But if you grew up in an insecure, disorganized environment, you did have to. So you have a whole set of skills that the secure world doesn't use. And I suppose if you worked in a company where the majority of the people who worked there were secure, that would also create some kind of headway for you if you couldn't create that skill set fast enough. And it isn't an abruption the way it is in the insecure and disorganized world. It's a flow of energy away. It's hardly sometimes even noticeable. But what do you say we do a little bit of meditation? Insider Vipassana. So, Insider Metta.
Mentalizing.
Okay. All right. Let go of the meditation. How's that? So Saturday is the first exploration workshop, and a month later we'll do the second one. This one is going to talk mainly about primary and secondary exploration, and I'm going to actually go through in a more precise way what I mean by basic mentalizing and advanced mentalizing. So if that's interesting to you, it starts at 9 on Saturday. There is a level 2 class that is just started and will close next week. If you're considering jumping on the level 2 wagon, all of that information is on the website. I really appreciate your practice. Thanks for coming. I hope to see you again soon. I offer the teaching freely, but if you're able to make a donation, there's a link on the website to do it. It really does help me, support me, and also the work that Mettagroup is doing. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon. Bye.